So it's trusting in that the context of the unknown, or living on the threshold of what is known and what is emerging, is such a creative place to be. And you start to trust that more than what you've got carried in your mind, what you've already worked out. You start to find, as you speak from that unknown place, something deeper than anything you could possibly be carrying emerges.
Hello, friends. I'm absolutely thrilled to be bringing you this conversation today because it relates to that which is at the very heart of what is most important to me, the future of relationships and of awakened communities. But first, a little backstory. So when I first met my wife a quarter of a century ago in India, and then entered into a relationship with her a year later in New York, we were already longtime meditators. And when we sat together, not just with our eyes closed, but open, and not just when we were silent, but when we talked, moved, danced, we noticed that the energy that we already knew well from meditating individually was slowly beginning to feel as if it was kind of expanding into the space between us, which began to feel not only electric, but saturated with trust and peace and, of course, love. But also in some way it felt sentient, literally intelligent, because it was extremely responsive to our own levels of attunement to it and our alignment with it. Kind of like the energetic antenna of a snail, but all around us, everywhere. And the more we aligned with this energy, the more we began to realize that it was almost inviting us to be guided by it, as if it knew the way better than we did. This was 2007. I was running the Edgar Cayce Center in Manhattan, and at the time, I didn't know anyone else who was having this experience, but could only assume that others were. About a year later, we discovered a prominent spiritual group called the Evolutionaries, who in fact were. And I think it's fair to say at the time that they were the hottest things on the spiritual block, alongside Ken Wilber's Integralists. Now, if you were doing psycho-spiritual work in the aughts, you knew about them. And if you were really serious, you kept diligent track of the ample innovations that were coming out of those laboratories, because they were nothing short of revolutionary. And of all the insights and innovations that did come out of those communities, and there were many, the one that I was most interested in, that we were most interested in, was the work they were doing on precisely this, the interpersonal field, on the very palpable emergence of a kind of energetic sentience that arises between individuals who are willing and able to drop their egos and surrender into something bigger and deeper. When we discovered that this was going on, we were thrilled, because we knew that we were no longer alone in what we were experiencing, and that, in fact, others were not only there, but had been training in it for some time, attempting to stabilize it as an emergent, radically more generative, cooperative, relational field that called to mind Thich Nhat Hanh's belief that the Buddha of the future would be the Sangha. At the time, I met a number of evolutionaries, including Jeff Carrera, others who to this day I continue to hold in exceptionally high regard. And yet, sadly, within a few short years, the organization collapsed in painful and dramatic fashion. And everything that was being publicly shared and privately practiced abruptly stopped. Incidentally, if you're interested in learning a little more about how and why that happened, I had a wonderful conversation not long ago with Michael Wambacher, which you can find on my podcast, or simply read the book When Shadow Meets the Bodhisattva by Andrew Cohen. So as far as we knew, the experiment was over and had perhaps even failed. Personally, I was heartbroken that what had been the very hub of an emergent phenomenon uniting psycho-spiritually informed individuals in nothing less than a kind of collective Tao had ended. And so my wife and I went along with our lives, and we continued to explore the energy with each other. Slowly, I began to share what I understood of it with one patient and client after another, building my own little community of those who could feel and appreciate it. Until last month, when Jeff Carrera announced a book release on his newsletter, and I suddenly realized that the experiment wasn't over and had simply gone underground, you could say, and that a small group from that time had spontaneously begun to continue the lineage. And so my guest today is one of those members of that group and a former member of the original group, author of a book that he recently wrote about all this that he appropriately titled The Space Between Us. So, Peter Mitchell, thank you so much for joining me.
Pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, Zachary. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. We met a couple of weeks ago and had an exploratory investigation, and the field was very much alive between us in that, and conversation flowed beautifully and explored all sorts of different aspects of this sort of unfolding. So it's a joy to sort of engage with you again, and knowing that this is going out to a wider audience than just between the two of us. So yes, I'm really looking forward to the opportunity, really, because the field wants to be shared. That's my experience. That's how the book emerged. I never considered myself to be a writer until something just started to come through with me, and the book is the distillation of 3 years of work with a group that very spontaneously formed. You described it beautifully. There was no intention to form this sort of experiment. It just arose between 4 of us and kind of took over, and has been directing my life, and those who, certain of us involved in the group, pretty much been directing our life ever since. And the book was part of that. It wanted to be written. I really was just a vehicle to pop the words down on a page. And now the message is going out wider, and it's extraordinary how it's happening, because I kind of just feel I'm facilitating the process rather than initiating it, which I think is how the field works, And thank you for that wonderful introduction, because you pretty much said everything I was going to say in this conversation. But there's loads to explore. We can really dive in deep into all sorts of different aspects. So yes.
Yeah.
So fire
Thank
away.
you so much.
So let me know. Let's see where we go together, because there's obviously a deep resonance. You've got so much experience with that, with you and your wife, and then in the evolutionaries, as you call them. And this is something the more you engage with the field, the more it sort of deepens your understanding of it. It's a transformative process. It's not just a wonderful experience. It really does rewire you in fundamental ways. And so that's a fascinating thing to explore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Peter. I wanted to bring everyone up to speed so that we could launch off into what's most important, because there's kind of a lot going on with this. Obviously, most of it, if I'm not mistaken, I think we agree on pretty much everything we've already shared and explored with each other. I'm excited to see, to have more shared experiences with you and really understanding what's going on here. But, for those who might be just joining this conversation, a simple way that I've started to explore it is, and maybe I shared a little bit of this with you last time we spoke, is there are many ways to see the history of the world, the history of civilization. Many of them are very interesting. One of the one that's very alive for me right now is this idea of there were 3 stages. The first is that we were unconsciously in alignment with this energy. This was the garden, unaware, unself-aware. And, that was lovely. But of course, there was There was no consciousness, no self-consciousness. And all the myths tell us of this fall, the apple, the departure. One of the ways that I see that is the development of the neocortex. The minute the mind and formal operational thinking became possible, we became atomistic, individual entities rolling around, and our ability to kind of move like within the field together, like schools of fish, or like the gorgeous murmuration of birds, all that ended. And I feel like we are at the kind of final stage of that part two. And what's happening now is we have an opportunity to still be individual, but to return back to this collective energy that clearly is coming from a deeper substrate of reality. And there's something so powerful. It's like, what did they say about, there was a great viral video years ago about how to start a movement. And it was a wonderful video. And it was so funny because it starts with this guy dancing crazily at a festival. And the presenter who did it at a TED talk said, one guy dancing madly in this particular way is a lone nut. The minute you start to have others, it becomes a movement because there's a shared acknowledgement of what's happening. We're actually it's almost like object relations in therapy. We're pointing to something and say, we agree on the rudiments of this. And the more that we agree, the more that these subtle structures, let's face it, become like almost like material objects that we can agree on. What do you think about that? And how does that pan out? I think maybe just getting people to where we're wanting to from now.
I think the way you describe this evolutionary arc is absolutely spot on. I'm not going to take it all the way back to the Garden of Eden. So I'm going to maybe concentrate on the last few centuries, because that's when, particularly in the West, individuals have sort of differentiated out of the collective in a big way. So I suppose the way to look at it in broad terms would be, we were essentially tribal, where you were a unit in a tribe and your identity was the tribe, not yourself. And that was fine for what it was, but there's constraints and limits on what becomes possible. So the next step was this sort of gradual differentiation of the individuals out of the tribe. And I think particularly in the last 200 or 300 years in the West, particularly, that process of individualization has really accelerated, and there's so many benefits. I think it was a necessary step in evolution. I don't think it was a pathological step. I think the potential of what had been reached tribally, we'd hit the limits, and this was the next step, which allows for sort of a different form of creativity and responsibility, and sort of almost the development of a moral sensibility. And so there's all these different things that go along with being an individual that started to inform and accelerate, I suppose, the way things were unfolding. But my sense now, and you just look at the way the world is at the moment, we've literally reached the pathological limits of this step. It's sort of hyper-individualization now. Everything is siloed into content. If you're not with me, you're against me. It really has become, individuals butting up against each other. There's no sense of a collective, or the sense of a collective is thinning. It's really fraying at the edges. And I think people are also starting to feel the distress of that. So it's allowed so much to happen, but it's taken us to the point where we've lost that sense of belonging. So before I take it to the next step, which is what I think the field the field of being is allowing, is to look at. I've been fascinated, and this is how the book emerged, by looking at the way liberal thought has evolved over the last few centuries. It's very much gone sort of human rights, and then it's bounced back towards the collective, and then the human rights and the collective. And I was reading a book about it, and it ended up with, the the present day when everything is fragmenting and the sense of the collective is disintegrating. And the book finished there, which was really depressing, because I thought, oh, well, what's the next step? And then I realized the work that we'd been doing with our group for the last 3 years was the next step. Because what makes the field so alive is that everybody is standing in their own understanding. They're dropping all the masks, all the identities, but they still have their depth of experience that's integrated into their being. So standing in that, but with boundaries down, allows one's individual sort of personality, one's own flavor, one's own depth of experience to sort of meld with everybody else's. So there is a sense of a collective. That's the field is very much sort of one container with many voices. So I had having a conversation with actually Margaret, who was one of the original 4 of the group today, and she was describing a conversation she'd had with someone. And I said it was one conversation, not 2 voices. And that's the experience in the field, is that you really, really do feel that it didn't really matter who was speaking. What was actually present was a container of intelligence that was supported by everybody. It allowed them to remain autonomous, standing in their own authority, but at the same time completely aware of the deep connections that were sort of operating at the same time. So I think this is, as you said, it's the next step. We've gone to the extreme where sort of being a hyper-individual sort of self is actually destroying the planet. It's destroying our society. It's really fragmenting everything. And this seems to be the next rather urgent step to take, where that gets reintegrated back into the collective sense without in any way, it's not a merging, it's not a blending, it's not finding sameness. It's actually allowing diversity to exist in a beautifully creative sort of, well, we call it an alchemical chamber. And in that process, each individual is also changed by the process. So you're not a static identity. You're actually literally evolving in real time, and you can see it happen to yourself, to others. It's part of, like, you literally feel you're part of a flow that's emerging. That's probably enough for now. So you've probably given you plenty to chew on and work with there. So
we're just so on the same page, Peter. It's like that fracturization of the tribe had to take place for individuality, likely for also personal responsibility and the exploration of free will, actually, I do believe.
Absolutely.
But it's absolutely hit its point of diminishing returns since some time, we should say.
Yes.
And I think people have been kind of pendulating between not understanding, we can't go back to the tribe, that's wrong.
Yes. Yeah.
And we also can't keep pushing the individuality, that's wrong. And so that's why it's been so alive for me, this whole experience. But let's be very clear, and this is where the rubber hits the road.
Mm-hmm.
This is not an intellectual understanding.
No.
That's where this differentiates from pretty much all the other attempts at creating a new form of community, collaboration, collective, whatever we want to call it. And I have been studying since I was a child. Why are all of these unbelievable communities, psychological, spiritual, you name it, Buddhist, the most credentialed communities on the planet with regards to personal and spiritual development, you and I both know only too well, have gone down in flames over and over again in our lifetimes, and prior to that many times. I've obsessed over that. I've obsessed because it's, there but by the grace of God go I. And what I have noticed in my own relationships, being informed by this energetic, I call it the energetic tether. There's a tether, we can feel it. There's a tether between us, and we have to nurture that. There's no thinking around that. There's no I mean, yes, we want to have a taxonomy. It would be great to have some principles and some axioms. I mean, that's going to happen naturally. But you're not making decisions about the field or about the relationship by going to that list and thinking, am I covering this? It's not about that. It's a felt sense. And that for me, that I'd love you to talk into, has changed everything. And this has been one of the most powerful, this was the powerful work I did with my wife. We can feel it. I mean, we look at each other, I mean, at this point we're solid as rocks, and we've always really been, but we definitely went through a period of time where we were negotiating that tether. And I always say proudly, she taught me about this more than I knew. I had the felt sense because I'd been a meditator, but she was the good woman that would look at me and say that you're stretching the tether. And I would look at her and I would have to really feel into that energy and go, she's right. I'm stretching the tether. Why am I stretching? And then we can, the whys and the wherefores. But most importantly, it was, can we keep this thing solid? And when I've begun to explore that with, in my practice and with my community, that's been one of the most powerful things. I mean, other than having a transcendent experience, other than getting in touch with the energetic heart, other than confronting and integrating the shadow that, sabotages our life, that felt sense of the web, what I sometimes even daringly dare to call the Tao, we start to feel that with each other and in the world. The relief that we can kind of trust that it's going to guide us, and it will tell us, am I in tune here? Am I taking care of you? By which I mean us. If I'm nurturing and tending to us, everything's going to go well. And that's completely opposite from what's really happened in the world, which is like, I got to take care of number one. And it's not even an intellectual thing. Once again, it's a felt sense. When you start to feel this, like you said, the field wants to expand. I feel that too, as the web wants to create. I mean, in my life, probably in your life too, it's like putting nodes in this, what I sometimes call this, is like an energetic lattice of care. Sometimes I don't want to say the word love, because, the people who are on the edge are like, oh, that's too much. But like, let's face it, it's a very relaxed, safe, peaceful kind of just love.
I don't have a problem with the word love, because I think, I mean, my understanding of this has developed over 3 years from a very spontaneous arising with 4 individuals, when the energy was just in the meeting, and then we'd see each other again in 2 weeks, and it would arise again, to actually my feeling I'm living in the field now, and my life is unfolding and being directed with it. And that experience is that I'm not separate from the field. I'm not separate from the other in the dialogue, in the field. So that not separate, I mean, it's just another word for love. And it doesn't mean that the boundary, there's no boundaries. There's, you are you and I am me. But there's something very porous that allows that which is common to us at the deepest level to express itself in a conversation. And it loves a dialogue. It loves talking about itself. It loves exploring its own expression in the world, because that's, we are embodied beings. What does that actually mean? What are we embodying? We're embodying this intelligent life force that's got so much bigger context than we can hold individually. As an individual mind, there's only so much capacity that you have to hold. But when you start to plug into this different dimension of being, it's literally like the top of your head's come off and you just can't find the edge anymore. And that's love. That's love. So I've kind of wandered off. I don't know if that was kind of on the line of where the questioning was going, but yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I think, I'd love to just slowly begin to move in what your experience is of what nurtures this. and what gets in the way of it, right? Because that's where we're going to go with this. Of course, we're going to be inviting others who might be already feeling it to go further. We might be inviting others who are just at that point of diminishing returns in the atomistic, hyper-individualized world that is ready to maybe consider that there's not just another way of being, but a return, a conscious return to that murmuration of birds. And that's really how I experience it these days. I really have a sense, and it's a felt sense, right? It's not intellectual. I'm not seeing things. I'm feeling these kind of almost like these waves of energy, almost like paisley, like a paisley tie, a paisley tapestry of energy that is between us as individuals and all around, and individually guiding us as well. And when I see the murmuration of birds, I'm like, there it is. You see the school of fish, like those are just the artifacts, the individual artifacts that are aligning symphonically with it. But it's there in an a priori field.
Yes.
And so I do believe that we are attuning to the a priori field, that in that second phase of individuality, we separated from necessarily and are now returning to.
I think that's absolutely spot on, Zachary. As you were talking, my sense was, and I've been writing a piece actually recently, and this was where it was going, that I completely lost my train of thought again.
It's the
that's it. It's that everybody is in touch with that sense at some deep part of this is not something that we're creating. The rising of the field between people is because it's already there. And I think everybody, if you really start to question them at a deep point, is aware of that something is missing in their lives at the moment, but they can't remember what it is. Somewhere they sort of know that they should know, but it's been buried so deep in this sort of unfolding of the individual that they've completely lost touch with it. But it hasn't gone anywhere. It's there. And I think as people start to get really frustrated with where our current trajectory is going, they're starting to feel the longing. They don't know what the longing is for, but they're starting to feel a longing because they've moved so far away from it that it's starting to pull. It's starting to pull them back. It's because it's an alive, living energy, and it sits at the root of our being, of everyone's being. And so I think, because the experience, we launched the book with Jeff about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and the response was extraordinary. It's like that longing was just sitting out there. We presented the book as literally as a sort of a document of an experiment into this. And the response to that, just putting it out into the world, has been extraordinary. It totally took Anne and I by surprise. Anne is someone I work with very, very closely in this sort of experiment. So the longing is there, and when people are given access to what the solution, it's hard to use that term, but when people are given access to it, they feel their thirst is starting to be met again. They go, I remember now. It's sort of, but it's not, like you said, it's not a conceptual process. It's not someone thinking it through and saying, oh, that sounds like a very good idea, we'll give that a go. It's a heart longing. It's something, it's that connection that's already there. It's like the current is starting to flow again in that. It's like, when you sit on your arm and it goes dead, because you've blocked the blood flow, and then the blood starts to flow, and there's almost a tingle. It's a little bit like that. I think people, when they start to recognize that current starts to flow again, and it's a powerful current. It's the responses, as I said, we've had have been completely extraordinary and very heartfelt. And so it's moved we're moving way beyond conceptual approach to this. This is not about working anything out. This is literally about giving yourself to that flow of energy and allowing it to move through you and move you in the world. So,
And I think the analogy of the numb arm is very apt. It almost calls to mind the word amputation. We've been amputated
yes,
from each other and from ourselves. And I mean, you're in England now, you're in London, my old stomping ground. I went to boarding school.
right.
I mean, we know only too well. Finally, England, I've noticed over the past few years, has been developing a bigger understanding. Long story short, the world, especially the educational world, for decades now, has been breaking attachment with the child from the very earliest stages, which I have no doubt leads to this energetic amputation from the field, from everything.
Mm.
So, all of that being said, I would love to kind of open up to you for some space to share for someone who's getting a sense of this, who wants a taste of this. What was your experience, either with the group or on your own, of how this began to emerge? And could you just take us through a little bit of
Sure.
what began to happen?
Yeah, I'm very happy to. Well, as I said, it started with just four of us meeting on a Zoom call, just for the point of getting together, because we'd all been in part of this community. We'd all left sort of 20 odd years ago, before the whole thing. One, before it flowered, and two, then before it collapsed. So we were only around at the beginning of the flowering. So in some ways, the fact that we seem to be continuing the lineage is quite strange and extraordinary, because we had a long gap when that was really not part of the picture at all. So there was a spontaneity about the way we came together. And I think what surprised us was that we met beyond our history. I mean, there's a lot of shared history, and we could have had the four of us just, digging over the dirt of all the things that had happened and what was good and what was bad. We didn't go there. We didn't meet there. We dropped all of that and just met and explored what it was to be together in that moment. So there was a sort of a spontaneity, a deep intimacy, because we didn't have the history in the way. And my sense of what happened as the meeting started to unfold, I mean, I've done a lot of thinking about what is it that allows the field to arise and to consolidate. And so I think the first thing is just turning up as yourself without any idea of what that is. So it's the idea of being vulnerable, being open, being transparent, and trusting your own experience, trusting that somehow you've integrated everything. And you don't need to be working it out with your mind. It's already there. So it's that speaking from a very unknown place. From actually, I mean, like this conversation, I have no idea what I'm going to say next. And like you said, sometimes I lose the thread because you're not, this isn't all worked out. It's literally just coming out of the moment. So it's trusting in that the context of the unknown, or living on the threshold of what is known and what is emerging, is such a creative place to be. And you start to trust that more than what you've got carried in your mind, what you've already worked out. You start to find, as you speak from that unknown place, something deeper than anything you could possibly be carrying emerges. So, authenticity, vulnerability, transparency. And then I suppose the next step is when you're doing that with others. So say, for example, if it's just the two of us, like us, what I describe is a certain resonance starts to arise. It's a little bit like when the more authentic and real you are about what's actually going on in your experience, it's like a tuning fork. You strike the tuning fork and the other person starts to resonate. Not because they agree necessarily with what you're saying. There's potential for different perspectives, different views, different, life is complex and there's many ways of looking at a problem. So resonance is not about resolution. It's not about coming to an agreement. It's about recognizing that someone is speaking something truthful, something real. and it encourages the other person to speak from that same place. So there's that resonance. And then when you get a group of people who are willing to, first of all, listen, that's the other thing, listening. So you're not carrying what you want to say next in your mind, which sort of gets in the way of listening, because actually what you're doing is working something out. If you put all that down and really just listen, and someone else is speaking from a very real place, you get this attunement. You used the word before, this sense of attunement, this resonance, and it starts to build within the group. And the quality of listening, then, it sort of pulls you in. There's a focus, an attention, a living attention that sort of, you literally feel it. Even if someone's not speaking, you sense their presence in the meeting. And we start to call that coherence. So the group starts to hear. So as everybody's resonating together, that becomes a sort of a chorus almost. And so that coherence allows the space to become integrated in a way. You're still hearing people's expressions with their own voice, with their own flavor. We had an extraordinary meeting last Saturday. It was our largest, actually. There were about 18 of us in the meeting. And the sense was of silence to begin with. It was almost like no one could speak. The silence, the group silence, was a presence in the meeting. And then people would try to describe their experience, and all these different ways of describing that silence would come out. And yet you knew they were all expressions of the one same shared experience. So that was really, really beautiful. So that's sort of coherence is the next kind of when the meeting you really do sense it's many voices speaking from one place. And then out of that rises what I've started to call relational intelligence, which is not an individual capacity at all. This is intelligence arising from the living field that starts to emerge in that sort of coherence. And that you start to plug in. The more you let go of what you think you know, the more you become a channel for that intelligence that's arising between people. And that carries extraordinary depth. And I can't think of another way of sort of describing it. It's just you really do. It's like you're living inside a living pulse that's made up of all these different faces, but they're all different aspects of one event, one big shared sort of unfolding, I suppose. Yeah.
I love this, Peter. I think that's really wonderfully said. And like most miraculous things, you have to be there. You have to experience it. You have to feel it to say, oh. So it's which is very valuable, because I do believe in the intellectual scaffolding of transcendent experiences, or interpersonally transcendent experiences. We create a scaffold and we hold a place. We say, watch that space. Watch that space. It will be populated by what we're talking about, and you have to allow a certain trust that in the space of where you see nothing and feel nothing, the thing that we are describing will appear, and you will say, ah. But I thought that was a wonderful, and maybe just, if you don't mind, I would love to just give a little summary of some of the elements you mentioned.
Yeah.
Beginning of just a wonderful set of kind of axioms. It's been years since I prepared things in my mind before I said them, but I remember those days and how agonizing that was, and how weird and stilted conversations were, and how really narcissistic, frankly, not in a judgmental way, just in the fact that there's a complete misattunement to the other person, and this over sensibility on what I must say and how I must say it, and me attempting to present myself in a certain way.
Yes.
How
will I look? How will I look to the other person? That's
all based in fear, all in a fear gestalt.
Yeah.
But if I'm not mistaken, it's like, if you're preparing what you're going to say in any way, shape, or form, it's dead to the field. It's not alive in any way, shape, or form. It's certainly not being guided or emerging from that field. It's dead. And so that's kind of number one, is allow yourself to be spontaneous and vulnerable, and almost as if you're letting the next word roll out without knowing what's going to happen.
Absolutely.
Trusting that it'll catch you in that way. The old cliche at this point that it'll catch you, but yes, it does. There is a skill, I do believe, as well. Like, we learn to trust it, and the more we learn, the more it does catch us.
Can I add something at this point? Because and then we'll carry on, because it actually can be, I'm an example of it now. Sometimes it flows, and you have no idea where it's going, but this wonderful sort of unfolding emerges. But then sometimes you feel you're on the edge, and you're exploring, and you're sort of reaching. You haven't quite got hold of what it is you want to say. You're not using your mind. You're just making yourself available. So we've had wonderful examples in a meeting when someone's obviously in touch with something, and they can't quite find the words to express it. But that's perfect, because you're with them. You're in that same exploratory space. They pull you into and you can feel them reaching beyond what they know to trying to find a way to allow what they're sensing to emerge into the meeting. And that's extraordinary as well, because, it can be very uncomfortable to be on the spot when all these people are looking at you and you're not quite sure what you're trying to say, and it's not quite coming out, it's stumbling and things. But that's perfectly fine, because that's what it's like to live on this unknown threshold. And you're literally moving into the unknown, and the words are not necessarily quite there, so you're having to reach in and pull for them. So yeah, it doesn't mean it's always going to flow beautifully, but that's also part of the experience. So sorry, I just felt that was an important thing to bring in, because this isn't all, it's messy at times. It can be, but it's always beautiful.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, what becomes really lovely is if the others who are working the field with you, if we're all more interested in what's emerging from it through us, that's where the patience comes in. Like, I'm more interested in just kind of hanging out on that edge. I don't need to fill the space. I'm not looking, I'm not even that interested in what Zachary has to say anymore. I'm more interested in what this field is going to guide us collectively to do. So if there's a precipice that someone's on, I'm happy to hang there.
Yes. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. Absolutely. So I think I may have interrupted your flow, but it just felt like a really important thing to bring in, because you start to realize how precious these moments actually are, and that's when we're really human. That's the essence of being a human being, not performing. It's unfolding. It's that sort of living edge that you start to sort of treasure as a gift.
Right. It's that's what really changed my practice, actually. When I first started my practice many years ago, at this point, over 20, it took me a few years to realize, I was present and I was attentive, but I wasn't making every moment that I was with someone the most important moment that I'd ever lived. And that's a wonderful way of being, I find. It's like, this isn't a conversation in lieu of a better conversation.
Yes, this is it.
This is it.
Yeah,
this is it. That I think kind of gives the respect to the field that it kind of opens up a little more. At least I find. I'm sure. Perhaps you'd agree.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. There is no other moment.
There's no other moment.
This is absolutely it. We're on the living edge. This is the moment of creation now. And as I said, the field loves to explore its own nature, and it loves to do it in dialogue and and in group expression, because you are literally allowing this vast, undifferentiated trembling potential of
Mm.
the life force, you are giving it a vehicle to emerge in this moment now as an expression of itself. I don't even know if that makes sense, but that's,
It was beautiful. And I mean, for me, it's the future of real community and
yes,
real
yes,
collaboration.
yeah, yeah,
And I've worked in many different. I had a stint in organizational development and culture development. It's just, God bless everyone in business. I don't know if this is going to enter into business, because I think people would just leave in droves. What I really think is, I think this, if you'll dare me the hubris to assume I have any idea what this quote unquote wants or is intending. But I think it wants to change the world. It has an entirely different
oh yeah,
agenda
yes,
from what we've been doing.
oh
I mean,
yeah,
it doesn't care in a very chilly-willy, kind of relaxed kind of way. It's just going to go over here. But the structures we've created, it's really not interested in them. I mean, I think it would be quite subversive in those structures. I don't think they would survive, or they would have to be very, very liquid and malleable
yeah.
to bring this in an honorable way.
Absolutely. I think the potential for deep cultural change is totally inherent in what is arising. And that's what we're starting to feel and explore together, Anne and I, particularly with the new groups that we're going to start. And we do feel there's a way of moving this into the business world, but it will radically transform. The business world the business world is starting to get interested in these sort of interrelational dialogues, but in a very contained and sort of almost marginalized way at the moment. But there is an interest. But I don't think it realizes it's going to be biting on something that will actually radically transform it from
Well,
the inside out. It's a little bit like, the caterpillar becoming a butterfly. It's
yes.
going to dissolve the structures and create something new out of those structures. And it's going to change the way human beings relate. I think in our last conversation, I mentioned this. We had one meeting a few months back now, when we brought a whole load of new people into the meeting as an experiment to see if the field could support it. And boy, did the field support it. It was extraordinary. And there was one woman who was part of that new sort of influx, who had a history of working with women who'd been the victims of trauma from men. So she was that was very much her sort of working field. And she expressed towards the end of this one meeting, she said, I have to say this. She said, this is the first time I've ever been in a group where there are men who I don't really know. I meet them in the meetings every couple of weeks, but I don't know them. And I feel completely and utterly at ease with them. She said, it's the first time it's ever happened in my life. And we all thought, wow, that is amazing. And it was only sort of kind of 24 hours later, as we were sort of digesting that, we actually realized this is transformation at a deep structural level of humans. We're literally transforming the way men and women can relate together. And old dynamics have the potential to be radically transformed. So that was like, wow, that really was this isn't just about individual transformation. It isn't just about having a wonderful group cohesive experience. This is literally starting to change the way humans interact at a deeper level than the individual. And I think that's where the potential of this to really transform society and culture is sitting. I mean, I think we're just touching the beginning of what's possible. And that's what really excites me now. It's these meetings are great to participate in, but it's not just about having a wonderful hour and a half experience that's very nourishing and fulfilling. This is about realizing we're on a trajectory that is going to upend everything. at some point, and it may go through lots of different iterations to get there. But something it's like the flower is just beginning to open. The petals are just revealing themselves, and we don't know what the final flower is going to look like, but it's unstoppable, I think. That's my sense.
I'm putting money on it, Peter. I believe it. I really do. I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been in, personal and spiritual development since I was a child. I was kind of born into it. So I've really watched the landscape for a long period of time, even before I was professionally in it. And I absolutely believe that this is the next wave. And I think, obviously you as well, we've seen it. We've seen it arise in ourselves, feeling that energy. That was at least my original experience, was feeling that there was something. That was what meditation gave me. There was a more subtle way in which I could be its instrument. These are old cliches now in the Christian tradition, right? But there's an energetic and a somatic that hasn't been. And then, of course, which we should talk about, is what gets in the way. But let me just, before we go there, just say, it really often starts with the individual. When I've worked with individuals, it's either that meditative path or it's the energetic heart path. It seems that both can kind of get you there. Then there's the couple. The couple, I think, is a real crucible. I mean, of course it is. I mean, it's
absolutely, yeah.
And then, of course, what was happening in those original groups that you were a part of was that they were kind of expanding that from the couple into the laboratory of the small group. And that's where you guys were. And it was really incredible to watch, from the sidelines, and to be in a few small groups here and there of like what was taking place and what was attempting to happen. Now, obviously, spoiler for everyone, at least in the group, at least in the way that I've understood it, that, there was unacknowledged shadow that got in the way of that collapsed it. And that probably, as a cheap and dirty catch-all, could be a useful way of describing why a lot of these communities are, why the scaling that we can feel the field wants gets undermined. So perhaps now's a good moment to explore what your experience has been of, as you begin to scale this, what gets in the way, right? You've reminded me of my favorite story from Mircea Eliade, the famed mythologist from the old days, who said that, when shamans create a structure, when they create a house, which of course is a psychic structure, the first thing they do is they find the center of it, where they're going to build it. Because in the center, there's the snake. And when they find the snake, and I love this part, they take a wooden peg and they drive it into its head. Because there's a wonderful image of like, before you build something, make sure you identify first what has the potential to destroy it.
Yeah. What gets in the way? I suppose anyone trying to claim it is the big one. Not to go into the specifics, but I think that was the cause of the downfall of this. Where we both got our real first taste of the potential of this, was the person that had the vision. Let's be honest. He really was plugged into the vision. This sort of he called it the evolutionary impulse, or the evolutionary drive, and he was plugged into that, and was able to sort of transmit that vision. But he very much claimed it as his vision, and I think that's where the whole, you said his book was When Shadow Meets the Bodhisattva. It's that claiming of it is the thing that you then stand in the way. You are a block to the transmission of what is wanting to emerge, because you're trying to say it's coming through me, and that in itself, this thing is bigger than any single one of us. This is actually, it's the field that everything is emerging into. To be honest, this is.
It's the ocean.
This is the eros, it's the life force, it's the ocean of being. There's so many ways of describing it. And it takes radical humility to be a channel for it. because it isn't about me. It's not about, Anne and I are facilitating these groups, but the whole point is to get out of the way for this to come through. We just want to create the chamber that this arises in, and then not to go, oh, didn't we do well? Actually, if these groups can go on to then flower and become their own independent entities, yay! That's So I would say, any attempt to claim any form of relationship, because this is beyond relationship. You are anything in you that's small and separate, that is trying to define itself by what is emerging, is in some way going to be a shadow on the emerging. So it's about getting out of the way, and then getting out of the way, and then getting out of the way. And that's challenging, because also as human beings, there's almost an evolutionary drive to have an identity. It seems to be part of the human experience to have an identity. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, except when it becomes fixed and solid. You almost have to have an identity to function in the world, but that identity needs to flow and flex with whatever role you're carrying out in that moment. And the minute you try to fix it, it then becomes a block. So yeah, my sense is that it's just about getting out of the way again and again and again, and almost not even trying to censor where this wants to go, and allowing it to carry you, and do with you as it wants. That's my experience, and that becomes really joyous when you start to get out of the way and stop resisting. You actually realize the field knows way better than you. So you start to be carried, and that's actually very, very joyous. The pain and the problem is when you start to resist and say no, or too much, and I know that happens, and then you just see that, and you allow that to sort of, let everything be as it is, sort of thing. It's all part of the picture. It's any attempt to slow it down, grasp it, direct it, manipulate it for some personal identity thing. I see all those as the sort of things that's going to be the issue that could sort of, I don't want to sort of say block it, because I think this thing has got such an energy now. It's not going to allow anything to get in its way. But yes, anyway, I'll throw that back at you and see what you want to make of that.
Yeah, no, just lovely, Peter. I just agree. I feel like that great story of when John Lennon went to Yoko Ono's first art show, and in one of the rooms there was a ladder and a little piece of paper at the top of the ladder on the ceiling. And he climbed up to the top of the ladder. It took him a while. He craned his neck, looked at this little tiny piece of paper, and it just said, yes. And then Lennon said, and I agreed. It's a little bit like that. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
But it brings me back to the attunement. It brings me back to the attunement. What has, gotten in the way for me, let's just say, and what occasionally comes, I can almost feel it. You can feel, there are moments when the energy says it's not your turn to talk.
Yes.
Or what you want to say, it reminds me of the Quakers. One of my favorite, my grandmother was a Quaker. And the one thing I got from the Quakers was, perhaps actually a good bumper sticker perhaps for this, right? Because when they did their ceremonies, allegedly, apparently they always started with a few axioms. That if you're going to talk, if you're going to speak, you have to ask yourself a few questions inside your head before you do it every time. Is this the time? Is this the place? Am I the one to say it? And does it come from God?
That's beautiful. Isn't that beautiful? That's it. You asked what makes the field arise. I mean, they knew, didn't they? That was an expression of this. That was a flowering of this at that period, very much so. And I think what makes this present moment possibly more significant is it's arising in a dynamically connected world now. The potential for this to expand exponentially because of the way the world is connected is extraordinary. It literally was word of mouth or writing by letter or going to a talk. It was very much of the place. I mean, now, you're on the Pacific coast and I'm in London, and yet, we're in the same room. I mean, that is extraordinary. And then this is going to go out to all the people that you're connected with, and they're going to start conversations, and they're going to, wow, suddenly you can see how this ripples out beyond anything that would have been possible in those days. So it's probably very much the same arising. These things happen in waves, but I think our present moment is what gives it the power to spread. I wrote in a piece. I'm still working on it. The last sort of 10 years, there was the viral spread of outrage, and now we have the potential for the viral spread of connection. And I just think that's really quite exciting.
That's very interesting. I think you're absolutely onto something with that. That perhaps this could be a wonderful rebound from the radical disconnection that took place in recent past. And I'm just so glad to be talking with you, Peter. This has really been wonderful.
I'm thoroughly enjoying it. This is, again, it's very much how the field works, because I don't carry any of this as knowledge in my head at all. This is very much emergent out of the this dialogue between us. I think we're both. One person says something and the other builds on it and pulls on it, and that's how this works. So it's that field of listening and then risking, and and the emergence that comes out of it is extraordinary. So,
And the relief, the relief that it's not up to little old us to figure out what to do. We can surrender to this thing that actually knows the way.
Yeah.
I mean, Peter, thank you for the privilege of just
talking
with you.
And I have thoroughly enjoyed the process. It's been a delight. As I said, the field enjoys the process of talking about itself. This is it wants to be out there, and this is
well,
opportunity. So,
let's keep it going in some way. And
I'm sure the pace of change that Anne and I are experiencing, because we're setting up these new groups that will start in January, and it's extraordinary. We feel like we're on some sort of accelerated treadmill that's just carrying us forwards into, it's like every day a new vista opens up, and then it's wow. So I'm sure, if we were to chat again in the new year, we'll have plenty more stuff to talk about.
Would you like to share with people where they can, if people are resonant and would like to reach?
Gosh, I wish I should have prepared the website. If you were to go to my website, which is petermitchell.life, and there is a link you can click on there for Between Us groups, which is the new initiative we're starting. I mean, our current cohort is pretty much full now for January, so we're sort of starting a list of people who might be interested in this down the line some point in 2026. But yeah, there's information on there. People can.
Great, and I will put all of that in the show notes. Of course, for people who are interested, the space
Oh yeah.
between us.
Do read the
Um,
book. I can recommend it.
it's really lovely. And if you don't mind, Peter, I did feel like I wanted to maybe end with just reading just a very short excerpt of one of the poems.
Please do, please do.
There were lots of beautiful moments in this book, and I will say, for me personally, just having someone, others out there, having this lineage still be alive, because I can't express what a heartbreak it was
Right. Yeah.
when, this incredible movement that was taking place, which is now, I think a lot of people, it's like Freud. Everyone loves to kick Freud in the nuts, and it's
Yeah.
like, the guy was incredible, and
Oh yeah.
so were these
Yeah. Yeah.
communities. They had their faults, and we have to call those out and learn from those mistakes.
Mhm.
What was being done was
It was
miraculous.
revolutionary. Yeah,
It
absolutely.
was revolutionary. We knew it, and so there was something where I really thought, oh, has God misplaced our paperwork? Because how can something like this, careen off the cliff? And so once again, so grateful that it just went underground and has emerged with you and with others, and now we're beginning to maybe create another global, connection point.
Yes. Yeah. Brilliant. I'm
Deep.
interested to hear what you want to read.
It's just a short piece that just was beautiful. Deeper awakening. We meet and explore our direct experience of the unknown, and together discover a transcendent dimension of peace, silence, simple joy, and a depth beyond measure that words can barely touch. Words only hint at the living electricity that flows between us. We are all impacted. We know something significant has occurred, and it is reproducible.
Wow. Thank you so much. I almost don't recognize the words. Because again, I don't claim ownership of them. They emerged in the moment, and I offer them out to everybody. So yes.
Peter, lovely to be with you. I'm sure we'll have another
Oh, I'm looking
again.
forward to it already. Thank you,
Oh,
Zachary.
love
It's been
Thank
honestly,
you
it's
for
been
your
a
time.
joy. Thank you,
Okay. Have a great evening.
and you too. Bye bye.